Good evening and welcome to Coach World TV. My name is Terry Yoffe, and tonight as my guest I have Jonathan Flaks. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Terry.
How are you?
Great.
Good. So Jonathan is an MCC coach and has been coaching for 15 years. So MCC stands for Master Certified Coach, and in the world of the International Coach Federation, ICF Global, the MCC accreditation is the highest level that you can get. Just to put this into perspective and to tell you about Jonathan's MCC accreditation, in the ICF world there are about 22,000 coaches who are members of ICF, and out of that 10,000 are accredited coaches, and they may be an ACC or a PCC. Now when we come to the MCC level, there's about 610 MCC coaches to tell you what it takes to become a Master Certified Coach. And in the New York area, which is our chapter, New York City chapter, we have a membership of almost 500, and out of that we have about 15 MCC coaches. So I would say it's really a privilege for Jonathan to have that accreditation. It's really a testimonial to him, to his commitment, and he's, I think, renewed 2 or 3 times to his MCC accreditation. It's really a commitment and testament to him to really be part of and committed to the ethics and standards of such high professionalism in our coaching community. So I want to say congratulations on that. It's really a big deal. So
thank you. I appreciate you saying that, Terry, and it is a commitment. So just to clarify, when I first achieved the MCC Master Certified credential, then after 3 years I renewed it once, and then renewed it again, renewed it a second time. So I really kind of 3 times went through it.
Wow.
So just to clarify that number.
Good for you.
And I love actually learning more and peeling off layers in my own development and exploring different techniques and refreshing certain fundamentals. I'll never forget that in my basic coach training, all the training modules of a specific length, except the listening module that was twice as long. And I still find new ways. And I remember there was an elderly gentleman in the class, and you could tell by the things he said in response to some of the conversations and questions that he was picking up things. He was really listening on many interesting levels. And when we wrapped after the 8-week program, and we were all asked, what did you get out of being in the listening program? He said, I learned that I have a long way to go as a listener. And I was so humbled and inspired by that that I decided to make lifelong learning a commitment.
Yeah, listening is, I think that's one of the key components to being a good coach. If you don't listen, nothing else falls into place. So it's definitely part of it.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan, tell us about your path to coaching, and I know you have several areas that you do coach in. So tell the audience.
Okay. I'm hearing sort of 2 questions in that. How did I get into coaching? And then what are the areas and the kind of people I coach?
I kind of
that's
them
good.
together.
I like that. Leverage one question, turn it into 2. I'm good with that. I'm a Pisces. I like things in pairs.
Okay.
All right? We'll come back to that too, I'm sure.
Okay.
I had about 11 jobs in 10 years prior to finding the coaching profession. And that was after completing an engineering program at Cornell University. But as we talked about my musicianship and the kind of person I was very far off track when I went to engineering school in terms of my professional path. So some of those professions included marketing. I worked for an ad agency in the music department. I was in the field of corporate brand licensing, putting deals like Kodak Christmas tree lights together. I did some work in the headhunting field. Always in business communication and always related to people sort of being effective, people being effective. That was always a big part of what my profession was, including even something I mentioned over dinner. I was the organist for the New York Rangers at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah,
People tend to get a
I
kick
didn't
out of
even ask that
People
how
are-
you even got there.
Yeah,
but,
people get a kick out of that. That's not a story worth taking
Right.
our time for. But I did that for a couple of seasons, and helping the Rangers. I don't know if I helped them win or lose, but in 1989 and 91, I was the organist, and then that team went on in 94 to win
Right.
the Stanley Cup. I was there more for the audience. That if the
Right.
team was losing, we would keep their
Right.
attention.
Right,
And
exactly.
New York fans are
Right.
tough to entertain when the Rangers aren't doing their
Right,
best. They're
that's
really
true.
focused on the hockey, so we were just flourishes and ear candy. In 1998, so it's about 15 years ago, someone said to me, I have a friend who is looking to start a business, and he's looking for a coach. And this is someone I would casually had given some career advice to. She said, I recommended you. And I dropped my jaw. I was like, what did you do that for?
Right.
I was shocked.
Right.
I was flattered. And she didn't answer the question. She said, just go meet him. And so I met him and asked him some questions and listened to what he was up to and made some acknowledgments and suggestions, and he hired me the next day.
Okay.
So I was flattered by that. And then another person took me to lunch about a project, and a similar thing happened. Before I knew it, I was coaching 2 people, and I started to learn more and more about the profession, got into the training at Coach University, read some of the other books, the Coactive Coaching.
Right.
This is the core book from the CTI program
Right.
that you're familiar with and you went through. And very rapidly went from moonlighting to part-time to full-time coaching. In fact, that was the title of my first ICF presentation 2 years into the profession. I was asked to speak, and that was the name of my program.
Interesting.
So the areas and the kind of people I coach,
right.
I typically work in 3 areas. One is with businesses that are developing and looking to increase operational performance. So that's leadership, team dynamics, culture. Right? And at work, I've done that work in large corporations. I do a lot of that now in middle market, where I'm really passionate about where private equity meets New York. I'm a chair right now in the Westchester division of an organization called ACG, and their motto is where private equity, private capital meets New York. It's a very strong network of middle market investment professionals and operational professionals. So I love that. I bring that to an entrepreneurial businesses. Because all that communication really is like all the investors know. They can have fundamentals, they can have great accounting people, strategic resources, but if the people don't perform, it's a waste of time.
Right.
So people's performance is a key interest, and that's
Yeah.
an area I play.
Good.
The second area, and we'll probably talk more about this, is in the area of business development.
Okay.
There I work with salespeople, people who have to sell and serve and supervise. So that might be a small business owner or an entrepreneur who does some kind of consulting service. Coaches, I work with a lot of coaches. Again, have to get clients, serve those clients, and work with their other resources to
Right.
run a small business. Because
Right.
that could even include someone who's employed by like a Morgan Stanley Smith Barney or financial advisor, insurance salesperson. They're employed, but all of their success comes from commission and running a
Right.
small entrepreneurial concept.
Right.
That's where most of my business has been focused. And then, since I had so many job changes before I was a coach, my mama said to me once, I love saying my mama said to me, you're so good at getting jobs, maybe you should help other people do that. And so, after 11 jobs in 12 years, I did find myself doing a lot of career transition coaching and really have a approach and method for helping people figure out very quickly something that they otherwise agonize over months for. Is what do I want to be now that I'm this grown up?
Right.
You know the old saying,
Yeah.
what do I want to
We
be
do
when I grow up?
Right.
So I twist that a
You're
little
right.
around.
So-
and those are the 3 main areas
Right.
that I do my business.
So it's funny, but did your mother say, you're so good at getting jobs, how about keeping them?
She was kind. She didn't hit me that hard. My father, on the other hand, no.
Okay.
They were both very supportive
Yeah.
to the change and all through the years. Yeah.
So do you find that great buckets, do you have a propensity towards one that it's kind of more your passion than the other 2? And this is a kind of leading question.
That's a great question and a tough one for me because
Well, the answer might be
the answer
no.
is all because to some degree as a musician and creative person,
Right.
I am a variety junkie.
Right,
So hi, I'm
right,
Jonathan.
that's,
I'm a variety junkie. I tend to have like more of the kind of people that I resonate with, and they could be in any of these 3 buckets.
Okay.
So they probably talk almost as fast as I do, or as fast as I do. Typically, if they talk a lot slower than I do, they might find themselves better off with a different coach. So I resonate with creative people, people who are up to something, you know. Maybe they're doing all right, but they know they could do better, they want to do better. That tends to be in all three areas.
Okay.
So, but I think we're going to talk today, being that the subject that we're going to be addressing at the meeting on Wednesday.
Right. And I'm going to remind everyone.
We can mention that for people who are watching.
Right. Is
this group of two concept where I put two people together, and that's been popular in the area of people in business development or entrepreneurial small business owners, self-employed professionals, and coaches and consultants.
So we really want to hear about the coaching with two, which is really great. And just to remind everybody that Jonathan will be our guest speaker at our ICF NYC meeting this Wednesday, September 18th at 6 to 9, and he will be presenting in person. And if you want to find out how you can sign up, you can go to our website, www.icfnycchapter.org, and find out all the particulars about coming to our meeting and watching Jonathan really talk about this group of two coaching, which I find incredibly fascinating, and really am interested in maybe getting a sneak preview tonight of if that's something that you would love to delve into.
Sure, I would be happy to, but what we won't be able to do tonight is demonstrate.
Oh
it.
yes,
That's
just the two
that
of
you
us.
have to come live
Right,
to.
exactly.
But one of the things that I love doing with that program is letting people see it. You know,
Right,
we can talk about things till we're blue in the face, but when you actually see it happen, it comes to life.
Yeah,
so we'll be demonstrating that with two people at the same time. We're coaching two people at the same time.
That's going to be very
But you
interesting.
asked the question: how do you coach two people at the same time?
yeah.
So I'm going to share a couple of the basics of that.
Thank you.
What I offer some people is, instead of having a private conversation with me one-on-one, which that's also an offering, where they get one-on-one attention for sure every session.
Right.
Or another offering I have is a coaching group where people dial in or participate in a group setting where that conversation may not yield enough of the private attention on their on each person's concern that they might like each week and every week consistently. The group of two is the best of both worlds. And how I work that is I have two people on a 1 hour conference call. In the first half hour I focus on one. Right? And the second half hour I focus on the other. Now, there's a little bit of setup in the beginning, so I make sure people have, if they have, like right when they dial in, instead of jumping right to the first person, so let's call him Steve, and the second person we'll call her Lisa. All right? So I might say, Steve, Lisa went first last time, ladies first, so this is your turn to go first, but before we go there, Lisa, is there anything you need to ask or express? So you can be totally focused in the conversation. And Lisa may or may not have something to say. She may have stubbed her toe that morning. She may have had a very exciting day, whatever it is. Once she has gotten to that point where she is, a couple of moments of everything's good, how are you? We focus on whatever Steve wants to address. Okay? And during that time, Lisa might experience something hearing Steve's conversation with me about what he's up to. And they could be on very different subjects, but maybe they have a desire for courage, a new level of courage, or maybe he'll be talking about a resource, or maybe time management will be the issue, and she'll have some ahas by just listening. When his session is over, I ask him, is there anything else you want to ask or express to be complete and make sure we're thorough? And that's the first half hour. Then I say, Lisa, I ask two questions. The first one is there anything you want to add, comment on, or contribute?
Interesting.
And she might have thought of a resource, a neat idea, or maybe she's another coach in development and she's out of thought-provoking questions she'd like to practice. Okay? And I love, Steve now has two coaches. Right? And then after she's maybe made some contributions, I say, and during his session, was there anything that you had occur for you that was an aha for your own pursuits? And not all the time, maybe say 8 out of 10 times, she'll say, yeah, when you were talking about mustering up courage, or this, idea about time management. Yeah, that really, I could use that. I could apply that for sure. So even though she was just observing, she actually was getting some coaching. And I have some experience in coaching, so people tend to appreciate being able to observe and watch and learn, you know, from someone else coaching.
Right.
You know, even if I only had 2 years experience, watching someone else coach is always a neat thing to do if you're learning and developing as a coach. And in fact, I'm going to go on a limb and say that if you take a circle and you write all the words in that circle that represent, I'm doing it on these pieces of paper since they're here. If you put all the words on this piece of paper that represent good coaching skills, and then you take this piece of paper and you write all the words that could represent good communication skills that are important in any kind of relationships, in leadership positions, business development and sales, career pursuits, personal life relationships, you'll see a lot of them in common.
Absolutely.
And then we have a couple of other action pieces and accountability and other components in coaching. So that's what I love about this. Oh, and by the way, my clients pay less because they're sharing an hour.
Of course.
So they get a lower fee and they get added value. And when I stumbled upon it, and I won't go into the whole story how I created it, but when I created it, it's like, oh, I love that I have this offering for people now. So it adds value to lower fee.
Sure, absolutely. Wow. I find it so fascinating, and I loved how you answered my questions by how you explained how this whole thing works. Because I was thinking, how do you do that? Does one go first, one go second? Does somebody interject? You know, and it's very clear.
I'll answer that question. So the guideline we agreed to, when we see if we agree, is if someone wants to interject, they'll just say my name. Excuse me, Jonathan, or just excuse me. And I'm really good at saying, hold on a second, I'll get back to you. So if we're in the middle, because you know, you don't want to interrupt a thought process and a conversational flow. And that's, again, also good relationship skills.
Right.
Without this agreement, interrupting is rude.
Of course.
Except in New York.
Right.
Even in New York.
I think
sometimes.
It's a badge of courage to be able to interrupt in New York.
Yeah. But if it's agreed upon that it will be just sort of a flag, and may I add something here? And someone might want to wait till the end of that half hour. I often will say, I'll often find a point in the curve of the conversation. You know, there's several curves, there's several conversations that might occur within a half hour. There's several different topics we'll cover. So I will find my way back to, sure, Steve, why don't you say what you had to contribute to Lisa?
So if you're coaching Steve, and I would personally, my own perspective here.
Good.
I would be very territorial that this is my time, you know, to have this great coaching, and if I'm again in that scenario, I might not want the other person to be interrupting the flow of my coaching.
Okay, good.
So, is it agreed upon in how you set this up? Steve, would you be okay if Lisa, you know, had a thought and she said my name, and then when we had an opening, that we could do that?
Right. Let's say, for example, you were one of the people. There was Steve and Terry. And we talked about this in the beginning of the relationship, and you said, you know what, I don't want Steve to interrupt during the session, but I'd love to hear what he says during the break.
Okay.
You'd be okay with that, right? So then that would be our agreement.
Right.
And just for a practical answer to a broader question, how often does it happen? The interjections happen extremely rarely.
Okay.
All right, so 5 to 10% of the time someone will not want to wait. It's very rare.
Okay. It's just really fascinating. I love the concept, and I love that, you know, how you set it up, that you've got two people, each getting their shared time, and yet you're getting another perspective other than your own, and the coaches. You know, I mean, obviously, as coaches, we don't give advice. We may say, here's my hunch, or here's a thought. You've got to be very careful how you couch that.
What we do is we ask great questions and make good suggestions. It was Elizabeth Gilday who told me that. Do you remember Elizabeth Gilday?
Actually, ironically, I'm going to take a second. I got to Elizabeth when I was starting my path on coaching. She,
good.
at that time, was
This was involved
an
with NYU,
instructor
right?
at NYU.
Yeah, she and I worked at NYU
Right.
together.
And I said to her, would you recommend NYU's program?
Ah,
And she in turn said, I think you might want to call CTI.
interesting.
And that's exactly, now that you
Yeah.
have reminded me,
Uh-huh.
how I got to CTI.
That's interesting. Very good.
She said, yes, but here is another one,
Right.
and which I followed up with,
Right.
and it was the one I went with.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I really am fascinated by this whole thing,
Super.
and I just want to, acknowledge you for really for doing so. And I'm sure there may be other coaches doing the same thing. I don't know. I mean, I know they do group coaching. I've done that.
A lot of group.
But this is, again, more personalized. Like you've got your own coach, and then you've got another ear.
Yeah.
So if Lisa has something to say, after in her interim,
Right.
by the way, Steve, I love this, and here's something I picked up, which
Right.
might not have been picked up in
Absolutely.
the coaching.
Absolutely.
And then it's, thank you, Lisa. Wow.
Right. If I could pick up everything there was to pick up in a coaching session, the coaching session would last
Right.
1,000 years.
Right, I understand.
Because
Right,
there's so
right.
much going on.
Right, absolutely.
So I pick up what I pick up. It's usually pretty spot on, I'm told. And then there's always a couple of really interesting insights from another perspective. So that does add something. The other thing that's interesting that that I'm excited about is that it expands people's concept of team. So I spoke to a client today. I said, "Who's on your team?" And she's a realtor. Okay, she's at Corcoran, a
Right.
big 2,000 broker,
yeah.
large, breaking,
Right.
one of the finest
Right, yes,
real estate
I know it
brokerage
well.
firms in New York area.
Right.
And she said, "Okay, so I have my assistant, and that's it." And then I said, "Are you sure?" And they said, "Oh, well, and she started to expand some of the other people around her. And she knew where I was going with this. And so when people start to really expand their concept of team, and that is people with whom you can exchange energy and support to each other's goals, right? This is we put that in action through this process. In fact, some of my clients that are in the group of two, some agree to this, some don't bother because they're busy. They'll call each other in between sessions. So imagine you're in this group of two session, and then you meet on Mondays, right? And then Thursday afternoons you check in with your buddy for like 10 minutes. Hey, how are you doing with the goals you set for the week?
Wow.
Anything you need support on?
That's,
Okay, 5 minutes.
that's-
Yes. How about you?
yeah.
And I encourage that. And that tends to add value too.
That's great, because also it's a confidentiality, not just the coach and the coachee, but the coachee and the coachee
Right.
and the coach.
Yes, they
And
do agree
that's-
to keep everything confidential,
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, and I just wonder if that's a little tricky for some who might not want to
Yeah,
So
to expose themselves like that. Yeah,
So
it's not for everyone. There are people who say, "No, I think I'll go private."
okay.
There are some people for whom they really would rather, and for some people I'll start with 1 or 2 or 3 months of private coaching, and we'll do some of the deeper work and clear some of the obstacles and the fears and the challenges and
Right.
limiting beliefs that hold them back. And then they get to the point where they kind of got some momentum, but they still want the supportive conversation, so then I'll graduate them from private to group of two
Wow.
coaching. And they tend to like that option as well.
So what happens when you have two people and they go along and it's great, and then one has a topic that they don't want to have the other person hear?
Yeah, that's a fair
Because
question.
it's very private.
Whatever,
W-
yes.
Would they then say, you know what, Jonathan, I'd like to do some private coaching as well on this topic that I don't really want Lisa
Right.
to be privy to.
Yeah, that's always available. Do a la carte session or a 5 or 10 minute conversation
Right.
between sessions. I often make that available. And the other interesting thing is sometimes people will come together and they're not exactly pursuing the same thing. Like, what happens if
right, we
someone,
talked about-
how do I
yeah.
put these people together?
Right,
You asked me that
exactly.
earlier.
Yeah, exactly.
So what if someone's looking for a career change and someone else is CEO of a company? Or let's say someone's running a small business
right.
and someone else is a real estate rep,
Right,
you know, a real
right.
estate agent. What if one person is very upbeat and one is a little less upbeat?
okay.
You know, how do they work out together?
Yeah.
What if they rub each other the wrong way?
right.
In all of those cases, they get a lot of value, including if they rub each other slightly the wrong way. Because in life and in business, you're going to find people who rub you the
Absolutely.
wrong way.
Right.
And so as you're working on this out, even though this might be a slight distraction to the topic, you'll develop newer skills and be able to explore. Like, I had two people working together in one group of two in a relationship, and they both did what's called the Myers-Briggs. Many of your viewers know what that is. So if you don't, it's a psychometric assessment. You get some great amount of self-awareness from these tools. They produce a report. Fascinating resource. According to that, they shouldn't have actually gotten along at all. And one session, one said, Jonathan, I think that what you said may have bothered Lisa, okay?
Right.
And I said, well, that's very interesting, because you're saying that because of the silence after what I said, right? He said, yeah. Sounds like she shut down. I said, well, let's check. Lisa, how you doing over there? She's like, oh, no, that was great what you said. It's rocked my world. I'm just taking notes. So we learn a lot about how we perceive people and how they really are. There's usually a big difference.
Right.
There's often, not usually, but there's often
sure.
a big difference between
Big
what we
perception.
experience and what we perceive and what's really going on.
Right.
If people don't get each other, like don't understand each other, like someone says something and the other one's like, what? That typically doesn't work. There's just
Right,
no energy in
right.
that. But otherwise, I find it fascinating and exciting how different people from different walks of life.
Yeah. And do
are
you
willing to
ever
share.
find that two people come together in this group of two coaching and it just doesn't work out?
Rarely. So in the first
Okay.
interview, they'll
Interesting.
talk to each other. 9 out of 10 times it works. 1 out of 10 times, like, I don't think that's the right person for me. And I'll explore
okay.
it.
Got it.
And again, if it's one of those examples, so let's say they do work together, and then after 2 or 3 months they say things have changed or whatever. So we just make an agreement in advance that we won't just stop cold. No one wants to be dumped,
That's true.
right? So we make an agreement in advance that at a point in time when one side wants to discontinue, and usually it's after at least a 3-month commitment because of that kind of relationship.
Right.
You know, I have sometimes flexibility with clients who want to try it out and do month to month.
Right.
You know, we often like to have
Right.
people really get that the commitment is valuable and powerful, but people have their things. But with group of 2, we start with 3 months, and then after that's month to month, and if they want to discontinue, they give me a full month's notice. And there's a lot of lasting value that we're able to provide in those extra sessions, because I know we're coming to an end and I want to leave people with lasting value.
No, that's true. We have only a couple of more seconds. I know this went so quickly.
Yeah.
So a quick question before we wrap up in this whole thing. Do people interview each other? You do an interview process to see if they get along?
Yeah, let them call each other,
I got it.
ask each other
Okay,
what they're up
that
to,
makes
and
sense.
just I
Right.
tell them a little bit
Right.
about that they're not looking for that much. So,
Okay.
if people
So,
want to find me, I guess
Yeah.
www.jfcoach.com.
well, that's great.
J as in jump, F as in forward.com.
Thank you very much, Jonathan.